been too long, gentlemen. Good
It
Lord.
has. It's been weeks and weeks and weeks.
It's been like 4 or 5 weeks. I don't even know what the
And
actual...
I feel like I've been off of polo a lot that time too.
Yeah, we've definitely been apart from each other. But
I mean,
Well-
we're all killing it though.
yeah, I'm definitely down on my push-ups. I'm not doing 300 anymore.
Like,
But I am
Michael was
running.
so disappointed that he was like,
I'm not going to do a podcast with a man who doesn't do 300 push-ups.
Beckwith is on his way back. Amateur hour here. He says, I didn't plug my computer into power, so it died. That guy. Michael, we can't hear you.
Oh,
But now you can.
Did you also forget to press the power button on your mic?
The phantom power? Yes.
Good work. All right, guys. Welcome to episode 8 of the Reclaiming Man podcast. I'm your host, Scott Silvey, and with me, as always, we have Preston, the Southern Canuck, Radomski.
good evening, gentlemen. Sorry, I just...
And
just so excited that we're hanging out again.
and Michael Masterman. Ooh, I'm not that out.
I'm here. We're rocking.
Mr. Beckwith, how are you doing tonight, sir?
Doing great.
All right. So today I wanted to talk with y'all about, so over the course of the first 7 episodes, we've talked a bit about reclaiming man as, helping people find their tribe. And in some ways doing it through the lens of how we found our tribe and how we're building our tribe. But I don't know that we've really dove deep into what does that mean? Like, how do we find a tribe in modern society? And this isn't going to be like a, online dating for tribe advertisement.
Yeah.
Tribematch.com.
That's the app that we're going to come out with.
Yeah,
It's a
that's
long
what
term.
we're-
It's a long
everyone-
term play here, guys.
I think I get what you're trying to put down is this is not going to be a direct, like, if you do this, this, and this, you will get a tribe.
Mhm.
Because it doesn't quite work that way.
Similar to what you were saying is, I think like most things, there's not a silver bullet to how you build a tribe. And one of the big questions my wife and I asked, we've been married now for 10 and a half years. And in that time, we moved to Oregon, to Minnesota, to elsewhere in Minnesota, to northern Minnesota, to Maryland, to an RV for 6 months, and then finally to Tennessee. And when you move around that much, it is hard to find a tribe and to establish like the types of relationships that will last for a long time. And so one of our big questions when we were in the RV, we were looking for like, what is home going to look like for us? Where is it going to be? One of the questions we consistently would ask ourselves is, how do we find our tribe? Like once we get there, once we made the decision to buy the house that I'm sitting in right now, was how are we going to proactively go out and find a tribe? I have an interesting perspective on this where if you're out trying to find a tribe, like you're probably not going to do it. Well, if your focus is on that external, that's again, we've talked about this in the terms of inputs versus outputs. If your focus is on an output, I think you're going to fail, or it's going to be harder to succeed, perhaps would be a better way to say that. And so for me, what really clicked when I started to find my tribe, you guys in particular, was when I started working on myself. There's a well-known to me, at least, quote by a guy named Phil McGraw. I think he's Tim's uncle. That comes a lot. And he says, the most important relationship you'll ever have is with yourself. You have to be your own best friend first. And so I thought that would be a good kind of quote to start with to discuss, because to me, I completely agree with it, where you can't be like, when you talk about a tribe, right? We're not just talking about, oh, this is my buddy that I can, catch a beer with every once in a while. If this is going to be somebody who, you want to spend the rest of your life being best friends with, that you want to have that type of bond that will see you through the inconvenient times, the uncomfortable times, the hard times. You need to have a relationship that's rooted in like some deep shit. And I think in order to establish that type of relationship, there needs to be mutual trust, and you need to know like who you are and what you are looking for and what you want to connect with. And I don't think you can do that if you don't respect yourself, if you don't believe in yourself, if you don't trust yourself, if you don't love yourself. How can you love other people? Saying you love somebody else when you don't love yourself is a bit, I won't call it a lie. Maybe that's too harsh, but there's some dishonesty, I think, in that where, or maybe not dishonesty, but if you could work your own shit out, how much more would you have to give to somebody else and receive from somebody else? I think that's what I mean. It's not that there's dishonesty. It's that I think we sell ourselves short when we don't put ourselves first and figure ourselves out. And then I think once you have that as a foundation, you now know what's important to you and are better able to sift through all the noise that's out there in the world to find the signal of people that you truly connect with. That's my prologue.
I think it's a good one. That was, I think, one of the keys that actually helped me find my wife. I know that has nothing to do with the
Was that-
tribe aspect,
I
but
mean, I didn't bring anything up about burlesque dancing. So,
just the concept that you brought out about becoming your own best friend and like loving yourself. Because before I had met my wife, I was actually married before, and I was just really young, and I'm not going to get into it, but was just kind of a young mid 25-year-old mess. And I just thought to
like
myself,
25-year-olds.
well, I mean, yeah, if we're being honest, absolutely. But I just decided, I'm just going to hang out with my buddies, because at the time I was living with 3 other guys in a house. And I just started focusing on myself. What did I like to do? How could I be a better person? And was not even looking for a relationship or a partner or anything like that. And it's funny how when you just do that, people end up coming into your life that you are not expecting, because you're not out there, like you said, trying to find any one specific thing and then failing at finding that. You're open to what's coming in and at you. And when you love yourself and you're open to that, then you will just find people along your journey.
Yeah, I think it's a good extension of some of the previous conversations we've had, especially when it comes to our identities, because there are parts of our quote unquote former identities or part of our past that we certainly don't really like, if we're honest with ourselves, the mistakes that we've made, et cetera, et cetera. And I have had to get to the point where I've accepted and moved past those mistakes, learned from them, gained wisdom from them, detached some of the emotional feelings of, self-loathing, or depending on how bad the mistake is, right? Sometimes we really beat ourselves up over those things. And if we're putting all of our energy into what we don't like about ourselves, instead of starting, to your point, Scott and Preston, start loving yourself, start becoming your own best friend, that requires a degree of honesty. And I think it is a prerequisite for finding your tribe. If you're not honest with yourself, how can you then be honest with other people about what you're going through? And how can you be seen as somebody who is trustworthy? And you said you called it dishonesty, and I think that's what it is. We start to, unfortunately, we start to lie to ourselves based on a number of different reasons. But yeah, I'm in agreement with what you guys are saying so far here.
Well, and I think I know, Michael, something you talk about a lot is overcoming limiting beliefs.
Right.
Right. And if you don't have the belief that you are worthy of having the type of friendships that we have with each other, then you're going to find ways to sabotage any budding relationships that could be that. And so,
Yeah. And if you're spending so much energy on those negative limiting beliefs, and you're putting your energy into the past, things that don't help you move forward, you certainly won't have energy to grow in relationships and grow yourself personally. And those are the things that I think make us as men bond, when we have the energy to invest into each other. And over the past week, I know we've had a ton of these conversations in Polo about what are the things that we're doing, the accountability piece of a friendship. You can't be accountable to other people if you can't be accountable to yourself.
the bonds that you want to create, that we wanted to create when we were ultimately looking for one another, those are based on some very basic principles of mutual respect, accountability, trust, honesty. And I think another piece of that too is there's a bit of vulnerability that comes from being your authentic self with others.
Yes.
And it's hard to do that if you don't know who you are, if you're not confident in yourself. If one of the hardest lessons for me to learn in my life has been that happiness does not come from anyone else. If you let anyone else control whether or not you're happy or you're fulfilled or you're satisfied or you're filled with joy, like good luck ever having a successful life, because you're always going to be at the whims of others. And so you've got to have the confidence in yourself to be vulnerable, to be okay with maybe people who, as you're trying to find a tribe, you're going to come across people that are candidates, but maybe for whatever reason, they don't ultimately become a member of your tribe. They just don't gel with you. They don't fit, whatever. There might be, and that could go both ways, right? There could be fear, kind of that fear of rejection that could hit as a result of you thinking that you found, somebody that will join your tribe or that you're going to join their tribe, and it just doesn't work out. And if you don't have the strength of character to say, I know who I am and I'm confident in that man, then you're going to, roll over and wet on yourself as soon as somebody says boo.
Yeah.
And I think similar to that, like maybe transitioning out of this idea of, okay, you got to work on yourself before you can find your tribe. It's okay. You put in the time, you develop discipline, you have a strong sense of identity, you know who you are, you believe in yourself and what you want out of life. I think, first of all, more than anything, once you've established a lot of those characteristics, like when I first had a conversation with Preston, we were and still are very imperfect in our pursuit of this. But there was just a natural gravity to Preston from the first time we met, because he was going through this and he was working on becoming better at being a man. And I've had multiple conversations with people that were professionally connected to Michael, as I was for many years, who have both shared the same thing. We both shared the same thing, that part of why we've always stayed in touch with Michael is he has that gravity as well that makes you want to know that guy and to be around that guy. And we all place bets in our life that the people we choose to invest in time and energy into in relationships, that they're going to bring you somewhere or take you somewhere, or that they're going to be there for you or whatever. And you're placing those bets based on, I think, a lot of subconscious cues. And all of that to me is that gravity that I'm describing.
That's a really good attribute when you're talking about some of the characteristics of who you want in your tribe, whether it's gravity, I mean, to some degree, inspiration or something compelling, right? The gravity is a great attribute, somebody who you feel drawn to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, gravity for sure. Yeah. Magnetism.
Right.
Well, it's no different than feeling that towards a woman, an opposite sex sort of situation when you were out pursuing like a lover or a partner. There's just, you will meet people on your journey that you have this, oh, wow, like a connection with.
Mm-hmm.
And, obviously I'm not going to take you home and bed you down, Scott, but it's like there's that same thing with men and friendship, but it's just,
which is not something that we're mostly allowed to talk about or have in society, right? Like,
yeah,
at least especially as a man growing up in a manly culture.
That's what I was going to mention earlier. It's kind of this paradoxical combination of confidence and vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
And the vulnerability hasn't certainly been something promoted as a part of masculinity, but it can be, it should be, because it's no different than any other relationship where, to the extent you're willing to open up and have conversations that are honest and meaningful, you're going to experience a greater connection with whoever you really open up to. It's probably less common than it should be.
So interesting question for you guys then is, so for me, just growing up in the 90s and, I played football in high school. I was terrible, but I practiced, played a little bit, played one series my junior year. And then I got hurt, but I didn't get hurt that series. That would have been really lame. I got hurt the next week in practice. But anyway, a bit of a macho culture, right? And the idea of saying you're going to be vulnerable and open up to another man, like, well, there are words that I can't say anymore. That's what
Yeah.
my question to you was going to be. As we've sort of evolved, perhaps past that machismo, is that the right way to say that?
Yeah.
The machismo, or just that macho sort of culture, has it been weird for you guys at all? Like, so we talk about old identities, new identities, and how even once you get a new identity, the old one doesn't go away. It's still inside of you. And so if we, at one point in our lives, had this identity of like, I've got to be this macho guy and I can't be this sensitive side opening up to other men or even anyone, like, just out of curiosity, have you felt any discomfort, I guess, as you've been going through this process of learning how, or just being more comfortable opening up to and being vulnerable towards other men?
I would say for me, no. I have always been I was raised by a single mom. I mean, I had father figures in and out of my life, but I've always been much more of that sort of sensitive person and because it's such a fine line when you mentioned like the machismo, macho part of society. There's an element of that is we don't want, but we need strong men to, defend their neighborhoods and their families and their wives. I don't know how to explain it, but so we need that, but just not in like a dick kind of a way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think that perhaps is the nuance between macho or machismo versus masculinity or true masculinity, because masculinity has those qualities, but they're not over the top, or they're not crossing the line into where they become this false persona that you're trying to put on a facade, right? That you aren't afraid of things that you should be afraid of, or that you have courage when you don't. I don't know. As I was growing up, I didn't feel this inclination to be that macho persona. I didn't participate in a lot of those different like social groups. I was a part of a lot of different social circles, from like athletics and academics and arts. And so I was walking the line between a lot of these different groups where I never was fully into one of them, but I grew up every year going out into the boundary waters every summer with nothing but what was on my back, no running water, electricity or anything, and truly just surviving for, about a week at a time. And those are things where I think like survival skills and those things should be attributed to masculinity, should be attributed to.
Well, that goes back to, we've talked about this with The Way of Man, where he's got the 4 virtues of strength, courage, mastery, and honor, right?
Right.
Where if those are the attributes or behaviors that are associated with men, and that's what you want to call masculinity, there's nothing in there that says you have to be a hard ass. And if
the disingenuous persona that you put on as like the macho man.
Somebody calls you out or whatever, like, you've got to go punch them in the face, or your manhood is being called into question. In a lot of cases, I think those people actually have very low self-esteem and very low self-image.
Yeah, for some reason, I equate the macho and meathead together. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but I think it's more about this disingenuous persona of what you believe a man should be that aren't the qualities that we should be pursuing. But I don't know if you guys agree with that or not. But either way, I guess as it relates to finding your tribe, I would say the macho, machismo, that sort of quality or persona isn't the type of person I personally would be going after in my tribe, because it's implying that somebody is putting something on that isn't genuine. And so that's one of the things, like back to your earlier point about opening up, being honest, being vulnerable, et cetera, being genuine. You want somebody whose actions line up with their words, that bit of integrity.
Well, and if you try to visualize, like, what does it mean when people bond, right? Like, if you don't open up to people, you're not giving other people the opportunity to like sink their hooks in, right? And really become deeply rooted and connected with you. And so if you have to have that macho persona, you're never going to have more than surface level connections with most people. And so as a result, when we talk about finding your tribe or building your tribe, that's not going to survive any sort of conflict or turmoil or hard times, right? Those types of relationships are going to fracture at the first blow.
One of the key components of the tribe, though, and identifying people for your tribe, I think is related to where you are in life, what you're going through, the types of challenges that you're facing. Because ideally, even if it might be a slightly different, I mean, we're close to the same age, close enough where I would say we're all the same age. But I think having people who are going through similar struggles so they can relate to what you're doing and what you're going through, and maybe they've already overcome some of the obstacles that you're trying to overcome. So there is some wisdom that you can glean. Those are some of the other things where I immediately identified in both of you, like, oh, we're all kind of at the same place in life where we have a family, we have marriages, we have jobs, we have careers, we have aspirations, we have dreams, but we had been in various stages. I should speak for myself only. I was at a point where I had given up on a lot of my dreams, and what was missing in order for me to start realizing progress towards those dreams were having some people in my life that could help build, help design, help balance me out, help hold me accountable to some of the things that I was saying that would get me there. And there's different types of people in your life. Some people are going to be opposition. They're going to be resistance to what you're doing, what you're trying to do, because it's not conventional. And why would you go after something instead of a nice, stable 9-to-5 job with a pension, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who would say, oh, you're crazy to pursue anything else. Are you just ungrateful? Are you not grateful for what you have? Or, those types of comments. And it's not that
those types of limiting beliefs, you might say.
Sure. Absolutely. And so I just wanted to, for sure, at least touch on that in this conversation, because I think it's been really helpful that we all are going through a similar part of life.
We are. In general, a great example of why that's important is imagine the period in your life when you didn't have kids and then when you did. And how the friends you had when you didn't have kids, if they had kids first, bye. Or when you had kids, bye.
Exactly.
Because there's just so much. And I think a lot of us as parents out there can relate to that. But now think about how that is absolutely true in other areas of your life. And perhaps people don't really give that enough weight. And the other piece I wanted to add to that is I absolutely believe that the people that you want in your tribe need to be pushing you to be better, need to be challenging you and holding you accountable.
Yeah.
Because if they're not, then progress is going to be very slow. But if you have people who are consistently pushing you and driving you to become a better version of yourself, you're going to make promises to yourself and to them that you're going to begin keeping. That's going to make you have higher self-confidence. That's going to encourage you to push harder. That's going to cause you to set bigger goals and to set bigger aspirations, which you're then going to achieve, which is going to create even greater self-confidence. And so the flywheel continues.
Yeah, that's where the whole, you are the average of, your 3 to 5 closest relationships comes into play, because ideally in your tribe, you have people who have a bit more progress in certain areas than you. So you're averaging up in that case. The average of you and them, it's like they're pulling me up because I'm seeing something that they're doing, whether it's financially or with their health or with their career or any of these different areas that you look at. There should be some tension and say like, oh, this person really is inspiring me to continue to grow, like to your point there, Scott. And if you pick 2 people, 3 people for your tribe that are all deadbeats, I mean, don't be surprised if in a year you're also a deadbeat. That's, I guess, what I'm getting at.
Well, going back to that self-love, self-confidence, I think we can all recall a time in our lives, and this goes for everybody listening or watching. Well, if they're watching, they're probably also listening, but we can all think of a time in our lives where somebody tried pushing us, but we didn't view it that way. We just felt attacked because we lacked the self-confidence and the self-awareness to recognize that
100% right.
I do need this and I needed this
100%.
push.
Yeah.
And so maybe as a bit of an in closing, I know we promised to be talking about how to find your tribe. And in this episode, we never once really got into like, what do you do? How do you step outside that comfort zone and try new things to meet new people?
I can give you a few at the end if you want. I've got some stuff written down.
So I thought that would be an interesting conclusion is, okay, so you go out, you do the work, you become the increasingly better version of yourself, consistent effort, et cetera, but you're still hanging out by yourself. I would argue that just the act of doing those things is going to naturally attract people to you that are probably already in your life that want to be along in that journey or are already on that journey, but didn't respect you enough to want to associate with you because you weren't respecting yourself. So I think there's a lot of that. But outside of that, like, let's get into a bit of what does that look like? If you needed to go out and find a tribe, how does that work?
Yeah, well, I mean, it has to be local. Like, I've got friends in Canada, I've got friends in Connecticut, and we try and keep in touch on Polo, and that's awesome. But
And a friend in Minnesota.
And a friend in Minnesota. Well, you're kind of different, Michael, because
I'm a local.
You're local, but you want your tribe to be local. Guys you can like call on for maybe you need an emergency babysitter, someone to help you move.
A cold plunge and you need a dedicated 20 amp and you have no idea how to do that. And your buddies are like, oh yeah, get me some details. I'll get you the equipment list and we'll do it this week.
Exactly. So to start building your local tribe, the 4 things I have written down that I think would be good places to start. First would be church. If you go to church or if you belong to a church, you would have to, I would imagine, like if you just go to church every Sunday, you're not necessarily going to find a tribe, but you would have to like maybe volunteer in some aspect at that church to help out.
You need to engage. You need to be present.
And engage with other men in that church because it's a weekly gathering that you're going to see these people on a weekly basis. You already know you have church in common, whatever denomination you're going to. So I think that's a great place to start. I think joining a martial arts is a great place to start, which is something we need to do, Scott, at some point, whether it's jujitsu. I'm going to say jujitsu and boxing are probably
Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Yeah, let's go.
So, I mean, anything else is just not fake, but you know what I mean? It's like, let's be real here.
One of my goals for this year is to get punched in the face, and Preston poloed me today to say we need to get boxing gloves so we can start sparring.
I was like, we need to get boxing gloves and airsoft pistols so we can practice shooting each other too. The other thing I thought of was a gym, but like more of like a CrossFit gym, like a regular gym I don't think you're going to make friends with, but like I deliver to CrossFit gyms all the time. And they're these like communities of people that look like they're probably going to hurt themselves really bad, but they're having fun together. So
well, I think so. That's actually one of the things I was thinking about was a gym in general, where part of what I think, like the people that show up to the gym all the time, part of what creates a bond between them is because they know that they show up all the time. They have the discipline, even on the days they don't want to. And that's a trait to me that is very attractive in a tribe, is people who have the grit and discipline to push through, even when they don't want to. Like that's a pretty rare attribute to find in like your average, moderately overweight beer belly man.
Yeah. The only thing I worry about versus like a CrossFit versus a regular gym is at the regular gym, like would you just walk up to the guy lifting weights and you're like, hey buddy,
want to join my tribe?
How does that interaction start? Because it's not a team aspect at a regular gym.
I can tell you from, I've never done CrossFit, although I've been intrigued by it. And we are running a Tough Mudder this year. So I've done Tough Mudder training that is very similar to CrossFit, but not this time when I trained in the past for Tough. But I can tell you from, as someone who had frequented a gym, there were periods in my life where I would go, 4 or 5 days a week for 6 months or longer. Yeah. And you just start to see the people over and over. And so then every once in a while, it's like, hey, can you spot me? And then maybe for me, I played a lot of basketball after my workouts. And so you shoot hoops and between games might shoot the shit with people. And every once in a while, especially if you live in a small town, right, you run into them at a restaurant. And so it is a mechanism
Yeah.
for like part of what you have to do is you have to step outside of not just your comfort zone, but your physical house, and you have to make connections. And so if you're just consistently putting yourself in a position to potentially make them, maybe it doesn't happen in the first week going to the gym, but like most things, it just takes consistent effort.
Yeah.
And if you're friendly and outgoing and kind, not outgoing, because I'm an outgoing introvert, but there are people who are not outgoing. And so that's just a matter of you do have to put yourself out there and be willing to take a bit of that risk and fear of rejection. But that goes back to the stronger your sense of identity and self-worth is, the less rejection concerns you.
Looking back at when we first started talking, the conversation the first couple of days was, well, we'll try this out for a week or two and see how it goes. And I think that's the approach practically that you can take with just about anybody. And I say that because we were just about anybody to each other at that point. Yeah, there's a bit of relationships that we had separately, but that's the same thing I think with most of us have at least one person in our life that we look at and say, they've got something going favorably for them.
Mhm.
It's maybe not everything, maybe they're not the perfect person on, I wouldn't use social media as the starting point for your understanding of what somebody is based on how most people use it. But maybe that is a place where, somebody says a lot of things that are inspiring and you want to figure out, hey, is that who this person really is? And maybe they're worth starting to talk to more or develop some deeper relationships. But my point was ultimately we were like, hey, we're going to give this a try for a week or two. And we were very fortunate, but within 4 or 5 days, I was like, no, this is it. This is a really great group of guys that I know is going to be a part of my life and be a good part of driving me to become a better person and help me achieve some of these goals that I have. So I think that's, practically the Marco Polo app. We've talked a little bit about it, but that's one of the things that allows you to connect at a bit of a different level. And to some extent, it takes away some of, or at least for me, I should speak for myself. It took away some of the inhibition about sharing more because you're talking, you're not getting interrupted. You have, 3-5 minutes, ideally. Sometimes you go a little bit longer. I think Marco Polo is a great
longer than
practical
3
way.
to 5 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Marco Polo is a great practical way. Try it out for, get a couple people on there and see, hey, are we vibing? Is this like a good amount of chemistry? Are they saying things that are interesting to me that I agree with, that I disagree with, or just identifying where do our values overlap and what are we trying to accomplish and what have we been successful at? So asking yourself some of those questions and seeing how does that, the group of people who you are around even right now, I think everybody has a couple people who they hang out with a lot. And so starting to ask yourself those questions, hey, is this person helping me grow as a person, period, as a husband, as a friend, as a father? Those are the types of questions I would ask though.
Sure.
It'd be
So
cool
Preston,
to
I know you had a fourth one. I don't know if you want to wrap that up.
Oh, it was just, I started to go to this Pokemon group with my kids every Sunday. We're learning how to play Pokemon, and I'm meeting people there. They're not necessarily people that I'm going to necessarily make part of my tribe or become great friends with because I'm going more to hang out with my kids. But I know there's a lot of adults that grew up playing D&D, Pokemon, and, the people that go to those have all that in common, and that I've met there is like super sweet and very kind. And, if that's something that's maybe more interesting to you than learning Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, although you should probably do both, we should do both. It just throwing out different options and ideas for guys to think about,
So Michael mentioned something. What about how can you use social media? Can you use social media? Is social media a vehicle for finding your tribe? And if so, how? I say yes, but I have some caveats.
Yeah, yes, with an asterisk, I would say, because
A great big one.
part of the reason a few years ago I pulled myself off of social media was what I felt the perception of disingenuous posts and comments and things that were more about perpetuating division and unrest. And I don't certainly want somebody like that as a part of my tribe. And so I started to remove that type of influence. And maybe it says more about me having a lack of ability on the front end of social media when it came out, aging myself, but to filter those connections and the people who I was friends with, quote unquote, and following, but there is on the flip side some people who have some sort of thought-provoking comment that they'll post, or will in a post truly just have an authentic experience that they're sharing that you feel like resonates. I think there are a lot of people out there. There are a lot of people on my social media that I overlooked because I was more focused on finding the bad than I was in finding the good. So that's what I'd have to say about it. There's an opportunity, certainly. It's just about how good are you at having the right types of people that you're following.
Yeah, I think that goes back to what we talked about at the outset, which was if you know who you are and you know what you're about, then finding people that are similar to that is a lot easier than just falling into the mindless scrolling of the algorithm that sends you shit, right? And not that I don't do that, like, to be clear, I very much sometimes do. And then an hour later, I'm like, what the fuck did I just do that for?
Yeah.
But I think if you know yourself and you can find other similar like-minded people on social media and follow them and follow who they follow and follow who they're interacting with, I think there is a way to use social media from a productivity or a personal kind of mindset growth and potential tribe. Then the other side of that is using social media. When I moved out to Oregon when I was 22, 23, I joined as many backpacker, hiking, outdoor adventure meetup groups as I could, because that was a huge personal interest of mine. And I mean, there were a lot of crunchy granola folk out there who were wonderful and great, and I would have probably crunchified had I stayed out there any longer. But at that phase of my life, they were my tribe. They were my friends. They were the people that I could open up to. I mean, man, you talk about a group of people who you just go through a 12-mile, 4,000 vertical feet backpack, set up camp. You're sitting around a fire at night, like a lot of really good open. Yeah, exactly. So I think there are ways to do it. I think you just have to be very selective about and intentional and with purpose how you use social media. Otherwise, the algorithms will get you and you will lose.
We have a Reclaiming Man group on Facebook.
Are you plugging the Reclaiming Man Facebook group?
Well, I mean,
this segment of the episode brought to you by the Reclaiming Man Facebook group.
I mean, that to me would be a very positive place to go. I think there's only maybe 8 members as of right now, but that doesn't mean
I don't know why I could have mentioned that.
Yeah, all right.
Okay.
I think
Marshat. Here,
I'll add 100.
I think there's only like 800.
Thousands.
But that's a place where you can go that if you listen to this podcast and find other men that listen, that live in maybe your area.
Other than us. I would like to point out that we have 16 members.
Okay. Nice. That's twice as many as I said. We've
Undersold
doubled
us. Undersold.
As it grows, it certainly will be a good source of people who are interested in finding a tribe if they don't already have one.
Or just talking to like-minded men that you can bounce ideas off of, and it's a positive space. Now, I'm a part of a few other similar groups on Facebook, and there's always the guys that are in there that are kind of like, what are you wasting your time being a jerk in here for? We're trying to be positive, but there will be lots of good, strong men in there willing to help each other out.
Well, I think with that, gentlemen, I would normally come in here and talk about joining our Reclaiming Man Facebook group, but Preston just smashed that.
Yeah.
So if you like what you're listening to here, go ahead and check us out on reclaimingman.com. Join our email list. We will not sell your information ever, but instead we'll just send you really cool shit and good giveaways and contests and just great content material about things like building your tribe in modern society, which I think we all can agree is not necessarily the easiest thing to do. Come find us on our Instagram at Reclaiming Man. You can even watch us on YouTube at youtube.com/, what is it, guys?
Reclaiming Man.
Ah, man. And that's a wrap. Thank you for listening to episode 8.
Nice.
Oh.